generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. In the first segment, maybe we'll talk a little bit about Hurricane Harvey and the aftermath, Hurricane Irma, and the impact that it's going to have most likely. Then we want to get into a couple of other issues. One is the whole issue of the federal budget and a deal that was made by President Donald Trump, as well as by the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, along with, of course, the Speaker of the House and, of course, the Senate Majority Leader. And we'll get into what that means for you in terms of finances. We'll also have a little bit more to say about Antifa. This has been a piece that we have posted here as well, and we'll get into that conversation. There has been some real concern on the part of some who say there are questions now being raised by various members of Congress, in particular the U.S. Senate, and more specifically Dianne Feinstein, about the religious commitment of some of these individuals that would be federal judges. And so some have felt like this has been an attack on the Catholic faith. So we'll get into that, and some repercussions of DACA, including Planned Parenthood, the president saying that every person has a right to live. And boy, did that generate a tweet storm of people saying, what about those in the womb, Planned Parenthood? So we've got a lot to cover. And along the way, in this first hour, I would love to get your comments. So if you have some comments or thoughts about some of the things we're talking about, let's open up the phones early. You can certainly join us, 1-800-351-1212. Might just mention in the second hour today, we're going to have in studio with us Rob Peabody. He's kind of an entrepreneur in the Christian world, and he has worked first in London and also with the National Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention, but more recently has come home and is here in the United States, matter of fact, in the area of Texas, and is with Awaken movement. But more importantly, what we're going to talk about is this app that he has put together, which is available to all of us, so that you can find out where you can serve in your own community. When you hear about Hurricane Harvey, when you hear about Hurricane Irma, and you say, I want to do something, but I don't know what I can do, and I don't know where to go to do that. Now, if you lived in Dallas with me, I could point you to all sorts of places where you could serve either the homeless, where you could serve those refugees who have come in from Houston and Beaumont and other places. But, you know, if you're in, Tupelo, Mississippi, or if you're in Albany, New York, or if you're in Stockton, California, or you're in Peoria, Illinois, or you're in Augusta, Georgia, or wherever we might be broadcasting, I probably couldn't help you out. But this app will actually help you, and it's something that I wanted you to know about. It's something I wanted you not only to put on your phone or your computer, but also encourage somebody of authority in your church. This could be your pastor, could be your teaching pastor, it could be your missions pastor, somebody where we'll spend some time talking about how they can use it and talk about how we can be the hands and feet and the arms of Jesus Christ in our community. So let's talk about what is taking place right now. First of all, Hurricane Irma, the Miami mayor basically said this is like a nuclear hurricane. It is at Cat 5. There are all sorts of concerns about the kind of structural damage that may take place. Also, the ocean surge that would come into Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach and other places. So that's a real concern, number one. Number two, because this has been on the news for so many days, lots of luck now trying to find any supplies. I've seen picture after picture of shelves that are completely empty. And there are some other questions that are being raised in Miami where there's construction, and that is because of these high winds, it is possible that one or more of these cranes could fall down. If they fall straight down, no problem, although it's certainly going to be damaging to the building they were putting up. But if they topple sideways and go through an office building, an apartment complex, you can see the kind of concern and damage that is there. So we certainly encourage you to be in prayer for those individuals in Florida. And we, again, don't know exactly where it's going to hit, but we've seen what has already taken place in other parts of the Caribbean. The first article I've posted here also is kind of an assessment of Hurricane Harvey. It's a good setup for some of the conversation we're going to have in the second hour with Rob Peabody. In this particular article that appeared in Human Events, it says Hurricane Harvey's death toll of at least 70 lives lost so far will be accompanied by tens of billions of dollars in property damage that AccuWeather estimates will be worse than any previous storm to hit the United States. AccuWeather predicts that Hurricane Harvey, which slammed into Texas and flooded much of America's fourth largest city of Houston, could be the costliest nuclear disaster in U.S. history. The extent of the damage from winds and flooding could also hurt the U.S. economy sufficiently to delay the next interest rate hike by the Federal Reserve Bank. Specifically, AccuWeather estimates that the ultimate property damage of Hurricane Harvey to top the combined inflation-adjusted toll of $70 billion from Hurricane Katrina in August 2009 and Superstorm Sandy in October and 2012. Just a minute, when I talk about this so-called budget deal, part of this was where the Democrats said, well, we will agree to an increase in the debt limit, but only if you actually reduce the length of time in which this will take place, and then we'll actually release the funds that would go to those victims of Hurricane Harvey. I'll have more to say about that in just a minute. This is one of those times where I think what is supposed to be the deal maker, Donald Trump, after all, he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, he could have said, okay, let's just take this to the American people, that you're holding up right now funds going to the victims of Hurricane Harvey because you want your particular answers to the debt limit ceiling vote. And I think that wouldn't go very far at all. But the argument that is here is that this may be the most significant set of property damage ever, because we are talking about not just the hurricane and the wind damage, but more importantly, we're talking about the floods itself. Billions of dollars of insured losses, they say, will be borne by major property and casualty insurers that write a large portion of the auto policies in Texas. This includes such organizations as State Farm Mutual, Allstate, Farmers Insurance, Geico, Indemnity, as well as Progressive Group and MetLife, to mention just a few. So again, I posted this article, number one, just to remind us that as we are starting to make some estimates, and these are very rough estimates, of the amount of expense and the kind of cost that is a result from the damage from Hurricane Harvey and the subsequent flooding, it may and probably will be the most expensive natural disaster ever. And so when you see that Congress the other day allocated $8 billion, that's not even a down payment for what is going to be just incredible amounts of expense. And, of course, the impact that it might have on individual lives for more than a few years to come. As I said, we'll spend some time in the second hour today talking with Rob Peabody about what you could do in your own community to make a difference, and certainly what you can do to not only help those who will be affected by Hurricane Irma, those who have been affected by Hurricane Harvey, but also what you can do for people in your own community and in your own backyard. When we come back, though, I want to talk about this budget deal, and I put that word deal in quotes. It is not a good deal. A lot of people have said so, and we'll explain why right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, so often we hear that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful. While that is certainly true, the claim doesn't go far enough. Many years ago, William Kilpatrick wrote about the vast majority myth. He countered this idea with three propositions. The first proposition is the vast majority of people are peaceful until they're not. It's easy to find examples of people who were peaceful for a long time and then quickly turned violent. The vast majority of Hutus were behaving peacefully before the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. By a year's end, the Hutu managed to kill 800,000 Tutsis using clubs and machetes. The vast majority of Europeans were behaving peacefully prior to World War I. All that changed in 1914 when the nations of the world went to war with each other. The second proposition is the reality that the vast majority of people will go along with the flow. The majority of the Hutus went along with the flow. This proposition is especially true in Islam. Most Muslims, especially in this country, would just like to be left alone. They want to go about their business of earning an income and raising a family. Kirkpatrick says that one of the built-in features of Islam is that you won't be left alone. It forces you to be good, and the way to be good is to conform to Sharia law. That is especially true in a country that not only has Sharia law, but also has established a caliphate. The third proposition is that a majority of people in any society are women and children. Although some Hutu women took part in the slaughter of Tutsis, it is true that the vast majority did not. That is little comfort to those who were slaughtered. Most jihadists and suicide bombers are men, and there are some women and children that participate. And while it is true that the vast majority aren't jihadists, that makes little difference in terms of the terrorist danger to me and you. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Let me begin with a hypothetical question, and that is you have a friend and he is wanting to go to the bank to actually change his loan structure. And so as a good friend, you say, okay, well, how much do you make each year? And he says, well, I make $32,100. Okay, all right. How much does your family spend? Well, we spend $36,500. So you say, okay, so you're at this rate going into debt $4,400 every year. So you want to go to the bank and do what? Well, you see, I've got a credit card debt of $200,000, and I want to go to the bank to have my credit card limit increased. At this point, you would probably think this individual had lost his mind. But then if he went to the bank and actually convinced the bank to raise his credit card limit, you would wonder about the credibility of that bank, wouldn't you? Because here your friend is making $32,000, but they're spending $36,000. He has a credit card debt of $200,000, and what he wants the bank to do is to give him more credit, to raise his credit limit. If you haven't figured it out, I'm talking about the federal government. All I've simply done is remove the zeros. And it, of course, is different between a family budget and the federal budget. But if you want to write these numbers down, this, I think, illustrates why so many people just shake their head over this budget deal that came down the other day. Because the federal government this year will bring in $3.21 trillion. It will spend $3.65 trillion, which means that at the end of the year, the federal deficit will be $443 billion. In other words, they will have spent $443 billion more than they brought in. And that just is simply added to the total debt of $20 trillion. Now, you would say, this is a country that's in a really bad circumstance. just like your friend who's making $32,000 but spending $36,000 and has a credit card debt of $200,000, you would say, if you're in a hole, what do? You stop digging. You don't ask for an increase in your credit card limit, but of course that's just what happened the other day. The 3-month debt ceiling was increased, or I should say the debt ceiling was increased by 3 months. And if I can read from our second article that I've posted here on Point of View, this will sort of give you a sense of what took place. Loretta Brown puts it this way. President Trump received some uncharacteristic praise from Democratic leadership Wednesday after agreeing to a deal to fund Hurricane Harvey aid, a 3-month debt ceiling increase, and a 3-month continuing resolution to keep the government funded. Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, said the president listened to the arguments. To his credit, he went with a better argument. Today is a good day in general, in a generally very partisan town. And so you have the statement being made by him and the excitement on the part of the Democrats, which, if nothing else, should tell you something right off the bat. Because at a time when we have to increase the debt ceiling, that is, which allows the federal government to borrow more money, which is, I think, akin to raising the credit card limit, nobody seemed to say, wait a minute, before we raise the debt ceiling, and before you hold Hurricane Harvey aid hostage, can we do something to suggest that eventually we would get to a balanced budget? Now, that wouldn't mean that we would actually no longer have a debt. We'd still have, if we just balanced the budget today, a $20 trillion debt. As I've said before on this program, it's not that the government is broke. The government is $20 trillion broke, past broke, and almost $100 to $200 trillion of federal obligations for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all sorts of other things that we don't need to get into. And so here you have this agreement by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, said he would add a 3-month extension agreement to the Harvey relief bill coming to the Senate floor. And this was the rationale for all of this. But as Loretta Brown points out, President Trump essentially undercut Republican leaders who were opposed to the deal. Republicans, first of all, would have preferred a longer debt ceiling extension to avoid giving any leverage to Democrats who might be negotiating in December. But again, you don't have to take my word for it. How about Senator Ben Sasse, who's been on the program with us before? He says, I think it is ridiculous and disgraceful that they want to play politics with the debt ceiling at this moment when we have fellow citizens in need to respond to these hurricanes so that we do not strand them. I think that the leaders you just described proposed is unworkable, and it could put in jeopardy the kind of hurricane response we need to have. And so in his tweet, he simply said, the Pelosi-Schumer-Trump deal is bad. And again, I would want to make it broader than just whether or not they were holding hostage those individuals who were affected and devastated by Hurricane Harvey. And I want to look at the broader picture of a time when you have the federal government is $20 trillion in debt. And to put that in perspective, by the way, I think I might give you one more number. I don't want to overdo the numbers, but one other number to keep in mind is that the GDP, this is the gross domestic product, the amount of money we bring in 1 year collectively is $16.9 trillion. So the national debt is greater than even the amount that the entire country brings in. And, of course, it is about, in round numbers, 6 times larger than what the federal government brings in any 1 year. So you can see we're in a very difficult set of circumstances. So if you'd like to join our conversation, that number is 1-800-351-1212. I want to get to some other articles I've posted here, but let me just also read from one particular set of articles that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. This was by the editors themselves. They said the American people may think they elected a Republican government last November, but it's increasingly hard to tell. The latest evidence came Wednesday when President Trump accepted a Democratic offer to raise the federal debt ceiling for a mere 3 months in return for $8 billion in Hurricane Harvey relief. And, of course, they give the same quotes from people like Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump and all the others. But, again, they talk about how this is supposed to make everybody feel better, and we actually have some bipartisanship. What they say there with a little bit of a wink and nod is, dogs and cats living together. What really happened is Mr. Trump overruled his Treasury Secretary and Republican leaders who wanted a debt ceiling increase to run past the 2018 election. Donald Trump instead gave Democrats exactly what they want, which is to set up an even steeper fiscal cliff on debt and spending in December, when Republicans hope to be focusing on tax reform. As they say now, Republicans will now have to take at least two difficult votes to raise the debt ceiling, while Democratic leverage will increase when the day of reckoning comes. The chances of a government shutdown in December have now risen sharply, or at least they have if President Trump wants to pass something with more than a few Republican votes. Republicans also are concerned about the fact that we have a situation in which this might eventually elect a Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. And as it says here, Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse put in his press release, the Pelosi-Schumer-Trump deal is bad. They go on to say that part of the problem is that congressional Republicans once again help themselves in this box. Congress can't let the U.S. default on its debt, so the majority party has to raise the debt ceiling whether it likes it or not. The smart Republican play was to attach a long-term debt increase to some other must-pass legislation and get it over with, one and done. In familiar self-defeating fashion, they say, the usual House suspects refused, insisting that the debt ceiling get a standalone vote. And so then they focus on things like the Freedom Caucus. Then they go on to say, yet most of these same members won't vote to raise the borrowing limit no matter what they're offered. They find the actual work of governance beyond their dignity. Their mutiny means that Mr. Ryan lacked a GOP majority to raise the debt ceiling, which meant he had to go hat in hand to Nancy Pelosi for Democratic votes. And ultimately, what you have here is, as many people have referred to it, and I certainly like what Ben Sasse calls it, the Pelosi-Schumer-Trump deal, which we are certainly not thrilled about. They finally say this may all sound like inside baseball, but it's politically relevant because it illustrates the Republican inability to govern. The Senate killed health care reform. The House can't pass a budget resolutions that are essential for tax reform. President Trump is sore, and Republican leaders failed on health care, so he now undermines their fiscal strategy and all but hands the gavels to Democrats. Readers might take note and hold off spending that tax cut. So if you'd like to join us, again, your thoughts about a federal government that reminds you a little bit of an individual that makes $32,000, spends $36,000, and wants to go to the bank to get the debt limit or the credit card limit increased. What are your thoughts? 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
I'm sure you've heard the definition of insanity, to keep on doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Right now, I want to talk to someone who has listened to Point of View for a long time. Is that you? Have you been listening somewhat regularly for months, maybe even years? All right, good. When was the last time that you made the effort, the sacrifice, to invest in the work of Kerby and Point of View? If you're concerned about the direction of the nation, something needs to change. Point of View wants to expand its reach, to add to the number of stations airing the program, to change more lives that will change the nation. But that won't happen if you keep listening, but don't give back. Please, now is the time. Step up. Give online at pointofview.net or using the Point of View radio app. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or again, visit pointofview.net, click on Become a Monthly Partner, and you be the change that America desperately needs. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talked about a couple of issues. Of course, the devastation of first of Hurricane Harvey and the potential devastation of Hurricane Irma. We'll be talking in about a half an hour with Rod Peabody, and Rob Peabody is going to really help us understand a little bit more about how we can be involved in being the hands and feet of Jesus and making a difference in our communities, as also for those who've been struck by this disaster. But if you'd like to join us, also, we've talked about this bad budget deal. I'd love to get your thoughts about a world in which we have the federal government spending much more than it takes in every single year. $440 billion deficit this year added to the $20 trillion debt. And this has accumulated very quickly. It was about $10 trillion in round numbers before President Barack Obama took power. Now it is $20 trillion. Some people want to blame one president or the other, one Congress or the other, and there's enough blame to go around. But certainly the debt has increased almost exponentially in this short period of time. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. And I want to put one more issue on the table before we start taking some of those phone calls, and that is our third article here is by Jonah Goldberg. He writes about Antifa. And he points out that the Obama administration, when President Obama was in office, his Department of Homeland Security concluded that Antifa forces were engaged in domestic terrorist violence. That comes from documents which were just obtained recently by Politico. So Jonah Goldberg, with a smile on his face, who am I to argue with the fine men and women of former President Obama's Department of Homeland Security? In fact, he says, as someone who's been fighting when Antifa defenders for a good while, I feel a bit like the defense lawyer in Miracle on 34th Street, when the U.S. Post Office confirms that his client is actually Santa Claus. Hey, don't take my word for it. Terrorist violence is the term chosen by professors working for and professionals working for a Democratic White House. He says, with this moral victory secured, he says, though, let me now break with some of my friends on the right and say that I think it's bad, or at least premature, to go all the way and label Antifa as an actual terrorist organization. Before I explain why, we should spend a moment considering how we got here in the first place. He says many defenders of the Antifa cause insist those loosely organized activists are simply anti-fascist, and that fighting fascism is some kind of get-out-of-the-jail-free card for lawlessness, violence, and intimidation. He says that's nonsense. The state has a monopoly on all violence save for self-defense. In a nation of laws, people cannot exempt themselves from the rules because they don't like someone's ideas. He said even if fighting fascists were a get-out-of-jail-free card, giving a bunch of adrenalized anarchists unilateral authority to designate fascists strikes me as a stupid idea. Antifa's understanding of what qualifies as fascist includes conservative campus leaders, defenders of free speech, and even plain old Republicans. And yet, as he points out, college administrators, local politicians, and police departments, particularly in places like Berkeley, have given Antifa protesters a kind of benefit of the doubt. And so have some of the media who think that there's something romantically heroic about direct action in the Trump era. He says this isn't to say there haven't been no address, but university officials and local politicians have been intimidated on numerous occasions. He says in Portland, a parade was canceled because of an email-threatened violence if Republicans were allowed to march in it. In Berkeley, the mayor urged UC Berkeley to cancel Free Speech Week for fear of violence, giving Antifa a heckler's veto. So much for the home of the free speech movement. And, of course, he says, predictably, such responses have only embolden the goon squads. But he says, finally, still, the local authorities that are contributing to the problem are also the best solution for it. In fact, the mayor of Berkeley has the right idea when he says Antifa should be labeled a gang. Like many gangs, Antifa is less of a sophisticated criminal enterprise and more of an excuse for hooligans to make trouble. Goes on a little bit further to talk about how officially designating Antifa a terrorist organization probably would reopen up Pandora's box, if nothing else. And a man by the name of Andrew McCarthy, who's been on this program with us before, actually has written about this in National Review. There's a huge difference, he says, between countering foreign terrorists who have no constitutional rights and domestic ones who, by definition, do. So again, he, on the one hand, wants to say that we have to stop appeasing Antifa, or sometimes they're called Antifa, and we should also at the same time resist the tendency to want to label them as domestic terrorists, because there are consequences to words. And one of the things we pride ourselves on here at Point of View is to try to have proper definitions for some of those words. What are your thoughts? How should we deal with some of these individuals, the violent left that have actually hurt individuals and spent a fair amount of time beating individuals up? Matter of fact, in just a minute, I might read just of one account of what it was like to actually be beat up by Antifa. But let's take some phone calls first, and that is to go to Bruce in Arkansas. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hey, why do we have a government?
I'm beginning to wonder. Help me out.
You know, we the people put them in, okay? Now, they're like a couple of little kids in high school. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are behaving like a couple of little kids in high school. They all act like, oh, Joe took my girlfriend. You know, Pelosi, all of them. They have downed every president. They have backstabbed every president. None of them can agree on a tax bracket. None of them, not one of them can. You can hold a gun to all their head right now, and every last one of them won't be able to agree that the damn sky is blue and there's a white cloud in it.
Well, if nothing else, what you're pointing out is the frustration that many people had, and probably the reason why a number of people who maybe weren't real Donald Trump supporters, nevertheless, if nothing else, reluctantly said, well, let's give this individual a chance, because maybe this is the way to drain the swamp. Maybe this is the way to bring about some kind of change. And to his credit, I want to give credit where credit is due and blame where blame is due. There have been a number of things that this president, frankly, have surprised me a number of times that he's done that we would agree with around this table. This is not one of those. You don't have to go very far to find people that we respect, whether it is, of course, Senator Ben Sasse, or whether it is, for example, some of the people that are at National Review or the Heritage Foundation, a variety of other places that think that this was a big mistake. But back to your key point, we do have an election, and it does seem to me that there are going to be some real changes that will take place. The Wall Street Journal right now tends to think that what will take place is that the Republicans will be voted out of office, that there will be enough Democrats that will take office at least in the House, and that Nancy Pelosi will be the next Speaker of the House. Maybe. I think there's another possibility, and is that there would be people on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats, saying, you know, we sent you up there to get something done, and nothing is getting done. And there is another, as we pointed out just the other day, another date-certain opportunity for Congress to act. This one has to do with the DACA issue, because, as we pointed out, the deferred action for childhood arrivals has been suspended by the President and the Attorney General. Those individuals whose DACA exemption comes due between now and March 5th will have that renewed. But if by March 6th Congress has not done something to address this issue, then you're going to see some of these individuals who have said they're fearful that they might be deported, even though they were brought here when they were quite young, even though they maybe have graduated from college, maybe have a very good job, maybe even want to go and get citizenship and want a path to citizenship, nevertheless will be deported. And so there is one sort of date-certain opportunity for listeners and, most importantly, voters to determine, am I going to keep this individual in office, or I'm going to throw him or her out on their ear? There's another one now because of this deal, and that is come December, there's going to be another vote on the debt ceiling. And that means either we get some changes, or it again just sounds like the individual that I talked about a minute ago, who was making $32,000, spending $36,000, has $200,000 in credit card debt, and whose answer is to go to the bank and increase his credit card limit. So we'll see. Those are just a couple of issues that I wanted to put on the table today. The second article is about this, the Another Bad Deal. The third article is the one that I just quoted from by Jonah Goldberg, Stop Appeasing Antifa. And we'll get into some other details in just a minute. I see we have a number of phone calls, so when we come back, we'll take those as well. Let me just mention that while we're talking about the debt, my commentary tomorrow, and I write these commentaries more than a week in advance, is very apropos because it's entitled The Debt Crisis. And it points out some of the consequences if we don't address the debt crisis. One of those comes from the Congressional Budget Office that says our federal debt is projected to increase from $20 trillion to $92 trillion. At that point, you don't have a government anymore, and at that point, you simply cannot kick the can down the road any further. Let's come back, though, and take some of your phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. To those who seek to better the world through the understanding of God's physical laws and innovation of practical solutions. That was the inscription Dr. Mike McCracken wanted on the plaque of the new conference room, paid for by his donations to Purdue University, and placed in honor of the people who inspired him the most, his parents. But the university rejected the language. According to their legal analysis, the inclusion of the phrase God's physical laws could be seen as an endorsement of religion, violating the Constitution. There are dozens of plaques throughout the campus. Most identify alumni or donors. In the Student Center, a large display of plaques features the bronze images of past presidents and a quote of theirs. There are quotes from past graduates like Neil Armstrong and even plaques with quotes from Socrates and Aristotle. So why would the university proudly display plaques featuring quotes from astronauts, ancient philosophers, and even past presidents, but refuse an alumnus wishing to honor his parents with a passing reference to God's laws? Good question. By permitting plaques to display secular quotations but refusing religious references, the university was committing what we call viewpoint discrimination. But after a letter pointing that out and some discussions over the phone, Purdue agreed to redo the plaque to make it clear that the reference to God's physical laws was coming from Dr. McCracken and not the university. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join a conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Just before we take some phone calls, I did promise to read just a little bit of one attack. And this was an attack that was described by Patriot Prayer Organizer. We mentioned them just in passing yesterday, but this was an attack by Antifa against this individual. And I'm just reading what took place there. First, he catches a slap in the head. Then someone gashes him with something in his ribs. He keeps his hands up as though that will save him while he keeps getting dragged backwards by his shirt. Then an individual known as Tiny at this point So we're talking about, first of all, Joey, who's being slapped, hit, something stuck into his ribs. Don't know if it was a shiv or what that might be. He's being dragged. Now, Tiny trying to pull him back away from the individuals. Someone crashes a flagpole smack on Joey's head, which will leave a welt so big that Tiny later calls him the unicorn. Not wishing to turn his back on the crowd, they half-speed backwards. A chase ensues as Joey and Tiny are blasted with shots of bear spray, my small mistake, and pepper spray. They hurdle a Jersey barrier, crossing Martin Luther King Jr. Way, while individuals are still throwing bottles at them. That is Antifa. The mob then stalks them all the way to the Alameda County police line. No arrests are made, except for Joey and Tiny, who are cuffed. So this is just one example of what took place by these individuals. They're called Patriot Prayer Organizers, and getting beat up, and then they're the ones that get cuffed by the police. So you can see some of the frustration that individuals are having. And again, one of the reasons why I've posted as our third article here, this one by Jonah Goldberg, Stop Appeasing Antifa. Let's take some phone calls. We'll go to Georgia first. And Anthony, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Yes, what they was talking about on the radio a while ago about the trillions of dollars of deficit.
Yes.
that we're being levied on us. If we would just go by what the Bible says and remember what it says about the borrower being subject to the lender, if we would just catch on to that, the truth, and not as like we went in debt with China with the bonds, and we were going to see what comes out of that situation with us owing China so many trillions of dollars in that, and just keep on.
Good point. Yeah, and one of the things I say in my most recent book on Christians and Economics is that if you really want to be honest, both individuals as well as the country have violated those biblical principles, because as we've already pointed out, one of the things that we have seen so often is that if you do get yourself in debt, it's like slavery. Proverbs refers to it. He says the borrower is a servant to the lender. Some of the other translations say the borrower is a slave to the lender. And so you can see that if you're in debt right now, let's say you have very significant credit card debt, your family says, well, maybe we need to buy a new car. Well, we're in debt. We'd like to go for a vacation. Well, we're in debt. We need to maybe get some nice Christmas presents. Well, we're in debt. You can see how in some respects the debt holds you in slavery. Well, in the same way, I think, Anthony, when we have a country, that is the United States, that's in debt $20 trillion, and the answer used to be, I'm old enough to remember when we used to say, well, we just owe it to ourselves because we're just selling bonds to ourselves. Well, that's not the case anymore. We owe a lot of money to China, to Saudi Arabia, and to all sorts of Western democracies and other Muslim countries. There are certainly a situation now where, in some respects, we are a slave as borrowers to the lenders who are those other countries. But let's go back and take some more phone calls. Alex in Kansas, KNEO, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love your show.
Thank you.
So I have a statement, and I kind of want your opinion on it because I've been listening to you guys for this past 2 months, and you seem like a very intelligent man. But in regards to this whole DACA deal and illegal immigrants, I mean, to me, and again, please correct me if you think this is a wrong position, but to me, it would seem like the smart thing to do in this illegal immigration thing is to tighten up our borders, and all the illegal immigrants that are here, we say, hey, we're giving you an option. We're not going to deport you, but we're giving you the option to become an American citizen. And for those that want to, I think that's a really merciful opportunity. And for those that want to have their cake and eat it, as it were, and don't want to become an American citizen, we say, well, this isn't the American way. you can't have your cake and eat it too. So you're going to have to go back to wherever it is you came from. So I guess I'm kind of asking, what are your thoughts on that kind of idea or principle?
And that was really what was proposed back in 1986 for Ronald Reagan. That is, we're going to give a blanket amnesty, allow individuals to have a pathway to citizenship, and we will close our borders. The problem is we didn't close our borders. And so this is why I've been kind of surprised that Donald Trump, who made such a big deal about the wall, didn't at least say, if I'm going to increase the debt limit, we're going to use some of the money that we are going to borrow to build this wall so that we can close our borders. But back to your key point, it does seem to me that the individuals that are part of what is called DACA, this is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, about 800,000. We're talking about individuals that mostly are individuals that are the kind of people we'd want to have as citizens of America. They were brought here by their parents who are illegal. They themselves did not have a choice in it. They're just here. Most of them, in order to qualify for this program, have to, in a sense, not have a criminal record. They, in many cases, have gone to college. Many of them have jobs because they're not kids anymore. A very significant number of them are in their 20s. So that would certainly make sense. And we don't want to deport them. Frankly, we aren't going to deport them. Anybody that thinks they are, they're living in a different land because, as I shared even yesterday, very high percentage of Americans do not want them deported. They're not going to be deported, so let's find a path to citizenship and make them citizens. But I also think Congress has a responsibility to be able to vet these individuals because in this group of 800,000, there may be some that are Muslim, that maybe don't want to be citizens of this country and maybe actually want to bring it down. There may be some that maybe aren't the best choice because even though they don't have a criminal record, maybe don't have a felony, they might have some misdemeanors, might be part of a gang. There might be some reasons why we would want to reevaluate their status. So providing just a sort of a blanket amnesty for 800,000, not even necessarily knowing all the characteristics of those individuals, that doesn't make sense. And that's why I think Congress between now and March 5th really needs to do its job. In 2012, it had the opportunity to deal with this issue, the Dreamer Act. They didn't pass it. So eventually you had President Barack Obama putting forward something that was like an executive order, but actually it was just a memo, because he knew if it was an executive order, it could be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And it's time to deal with this particular issue first and then begin to deal with some of the other subsequent issues a little bit later. We need to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking in studio with Rob Peabody and giving you a little bit of an understanding on how you can find places of service in your community. And then if we have enough time, we'll get back to some of the questions that some of you have or some of the comments. And if we don't get to those today, of course, tomorrow is our Friday weekend edition. Penna Dexter will join me around the round table and others as well. So let's take a break. If you'd like some of these articles, we have articles about Hurricane Harvey, about this bad budget deal, and about Stop Appeasing Antifa. We want you to visit the website, pointofview.net, and find those articles and pass them on to others. We'll be back with Rob Peabody right after this.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a Truth Team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time talking in studio with Rob Peabody. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that is so often people say, well, how can I serve in my community? Or now, in light of Hurricane Harvey and the fact that this will be record property damage and could be some of the most expensive kinds of hurricanes we've ever had, actually exceeding the $70 billion of cost for Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy. And, of course, we're watching what is taking place right now with Hurricane Irma. So we wanted to, first of all, help you know what you could do in your community to help your community, but also what you might be able to do to help those individuals who have been devastated by Hurricane Harvey and probably will be also devastated by Hurricane Irma. So we have in studio, as I mentioned in the first hour, Rob Peabody, entrepreneurial visionary, individual that I've known since he was a kid, interestingly enough. He's been on the program with us before, but also has spent a number of years in London, served as a global city leader for London and for the International Mission Board, but has come back here to the United States and leads VOMO, which we'll talk more about, as well as Awaken movement. But Rob, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Good to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's fun to kind of reconnect on some of those issues. My son and you have been the best of friends all these years, but let's talk about what you are putting together. Even yesterday, you're meeting with Senator Rick Santorum, or former Senator Rick Santorum, in the Senate dining room about how to use this app. So you're really trying to get churches and governments and others to realize that there is a resource here that really can connect the needs to the people who want to meet some of those needs.
Exactly. And what's interesting is I was watching CNN on last Thursday night, and the Lieutenant General Army, who is in charge of all the relief there in the cleanup, he got on CNN and he says, what we need is a disruptive technology, something like what Google would make, to connect the needs and the devastation to normal people and volunteers to unleash an army. And I paused it, went and filmed it, started tweeting CNN, because I'm like, that is exactly what we have built, that the Lord has given to us for such a time as this.
You know, it is amazing because we've said so many times that there's like this little narrow pipeline, and on one side you have all these needs or all these issues. The other side you have the people that have written about it or volunteered for it, whatever it might be. But we have this narrow pipeline. But the internet has widened and expanded that pipeline so that people can be connected in ways that never really would have been available before.
Oh, exactly. And the statistics are, the average person checks their smartphone 265 times a day.
Yes.
Average teenager spends 9 hours in front of a screen per day. And so with the technology, if we can harness that and leverage it for the kingdom, it can fit right into that pipeline within the palm of your hands. Click it 2 or 3 times, and you've found needs right in your local community, and they can sign up through your Facebook account or just create an account really quickly and be the answer or part of the solution to those needs. And so really trying to marry up exactly what you're saying, needs in communities with believers and churches and organizations, even companies, to go and meet those needs.
Well, we're going to talk more about the app in just a minute, but tell us about Awaken Movement, because that's the link that we have right now, and people might want to know a little bit more about that, because we, again, need to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Sure.
And there are some real opportunities in our communities right now to deal with the homeless. We're going to be talking about that, same kind as Different as Me. And, of course, we have some people involved in that in the film coming out. But also, of course, with these devastating hurricanes, there are more needs than ever before. And because of that, I think you really want to mobilize the church to be the church, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's our mission statement. We want to help the church be the church outside the walls of the church. And it really came from a holy discontent that I had as a pastor here in the Dallas area at a megachurch here, where I realized that for me, I was doing a lot of work in the name of God and doing, his work in his name, but somehow missing the heart of God in the process because I was ignorant of the needs of my local community. And so we were going to the ends of the earth, but had a blind spot for our local Jerusalem. And I feel if we're really going to see revival happen, it's when normal, average, everyday believers understand their identity in Jesus and then leverage everything they have and pour that out into society. And so it's reclaiming our Jerusalem is what we're all about, and helping to equip the masses to go live out their faith, to put action to it. And so there's no better way than use technology, which everybody's staring at all day long anyways.
Yes. Well, again, Acts 1:8 talks about Judea and Samaria and the othermost parts of the earth. Sometimes we jump to the othermost parts. We don't want to go to Samaria because that's, we don't like those people.
Exactly, right?
You know how that goes. What would you say to pastors? Because if you've missed it, I think there's probably other pastors that are saying, you're right. I'm really not talking about what I can do in my Jerusalem. So what should they be saying from the pulpit in that regard?
Yeah, well, the message I'm telling them is you have a tremendous opportunity to influence the people in the congregation, that salvation's not just a get out of hell free card. It's we're going to do something with our faith, and we have to take the blinders off and no longer be ignorant of what the needs are locally, begin to identify them, and then equip our people and train them and release them and give them those opportunities, because that's what it means to live for the kingdom of God.
Lots of times churches don't know how to catalog all these issues. Isn't that part of the problem as well? They are not out there seeking it, or if they get them, they don't know kind of how to connect people up, all right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And if you're using a clipboard at the back of a life group room and signing up and having, 8 different touch points, it's going to get lost in the shuffle. And so we want to streamline this whole thing and really help people in their local outreach by using our tech.
Well, let's, for just a few minutes, encourage people to go to our website, or they can go to awakenmovement.com. And as they go there, they're going to see a couple of things, because first of all, we have the website, but also one of the things is we have this promotional piece. It's a really kind of a testimony. It's a promo and a testimony. It's about 2.5 minutes long. And what I love is the fact that the second part of the testimony is from a pastor in Miami. We're all thinking about Miami right now with Hurricane Irma. But talk about that, because this is a video that, first of all, would be something we could use to multiply the impact today. People listening right now say, okay, this I want to know more about this app, and I'll find out about what Rob Peabody's doing and what Awaken Movement is doing. But if they take this video and put it on their Facebook page, or maybe send it out as a Twitter post, or I'm suggesting that they also email it to a person of leadership in the church. Might be the pastor, might be the missions pastor. You might have a pastor that actually does small groups or social media or something like that, so that they are aware of the fact that this particular technology exists, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point, that we can get this into church leaders' hands, lay leaders' hands, give them the ability to have the platform and the app and coordinate all of their local serving. So it's two-sided. It's people in the church and those outside of the church that have needs that can post those through the church, through the organization. But then it's also mobilizing the army of believers that we have in our pews every weekend, and help people go on this journey from sitting in seats to getting out in the streets and really putting action to our faith, especially when our nation is just hurting at this time.
Well, there are so incredible number of needs, and most of them you probably don't know about. As a matter of fact, I tried this out and typed in my zip code, and actually it just already knew mine, and popped up all these things. And, I'm pretty sophisticated, and I sort of know Christian ministries, and I sort of follow what different churches are doing, and I've interviewed a lot of people. I was seeing all sorts of things I had no idea existed. So this, I think, is going to be a great resource. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Rob Peabody is going to kind of take us through a little bit of how to use this app and how you can use it in your individual life, your small group, your church. And again, I want to encourage you to find out a little bit more on our website, pointofview.net. We also have, of course, this video. It's about 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. So my assignment to you, even at the break here, go and take the time to watch it, then click that share button, send it to somebody, send it to lots of people, put it on your Facebook page. We'll come back and talk more about how to use this app and how it can make a difference in your life right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, so often we hear that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful. While that is certainly true, the claim doesn't go far enough. Many years ago, William Kilpatrick wrote about the vast majority myth. He countered this idea with 3 propositions. The first proposition is the vast majority of people are peaceful until they're not. It's easy to find examples of people who were peaceful for a long time and then quickly turned violent. The vast majority of Hutus were behaving peacefully before the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. By a year's end, the Hutu managed to kill 800,000 Tutsis using clubs and machetes. The vast majority of Europeans were behaving peacefully prior to World War I. All that changed in 1914 when the nations of the world went to war with each other. The second proposition is the reality that the vast majority of people will go along with the flow. The majority of the Hutus went along with the flow. This proposition is especially true in Islam. Most Muslims, especially in this country, would just like to be left alone. They want to go about their business of earning an income and raising a family. Kirkpatrick says that one of the built-in features of Islam is that you won't be left alone. It forces you to be good, and the way to be good is to conform to Sharia law. That is especially true in a country that not only has Sharia law, but also has established a caliphate. The third proposition is that a majority of people in any society are women and children. Although some Hutu women took part in the slaughter of Tutsis, it is true that the vast majority did not. That is little comfort to those who were slaughtered. Most jihadists and suicide bombers are men, and there are some women and children that participate. And while it is true that the vast majority aren't jihadists, that makes little difference in terms of the terrorist danger to me and you. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let me just mention, if you'd like to join us, perhaps you have been struggling to figure out how you can be involved in being the hands and feet of Jesus, we would certainly encourage your phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We talked about some of the issues in the news, and we'll maybe get back to some of that later, but I wanted to give you a chance to hear from Rob Peabody and know about this app. And so the first question I'm sure, Rob, a lot of people have is, okay, how do I find the app? How do I put it on the phone? And how do I use it? Because, again, we want people to start putting this to action immediately.
Exactly. So what you can do is go to vomo.org. That stands for Volunteer Mobilization.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the platform for corporations, organizations, and individual users, it's also in the App Store on your phone. Whether you have an Android or an Apple, it's all there. Type in Volunteer Mobilization, VOMO, and you can download that. And then if you're a church wanting to harness this power of VOMO, we have a special platform for you called awakenmycity.com, which has its own corresponding app. It's the exact same technology, just tailored for churches and their exact needs. Right now, if you go to vomo.org/Harvey, this is our disaster response. There are 12,000 projects on there right now that are real, tangible needs of people affected in the Gulf Coast and up here in North Texas and really around the nation. And so people are posting those, churches are posting those, organizations are posting them. But really, we need to get the word out, because this is how we move from just giving money and having, disaster relief people at the very beginning. But now, for the next year, it's going to be cleanup from normal, everyday people, where this is an opportunity for us to just be a witness in the midst of catastrophe. And so you find that by going to the vomo.org/Harvey and signing up there. And so if you have needs, create a free account. We're giving this all away for free because we want to just mobilize the church for action and get all kinds of people involved So they can post needs on there for an organization. And also, if you're just a normal guy, download the app today, and you can sign up to serve and be out in the next few hours doing something.
That's just incredible. We talked with some people with Samaritan's Purse. As a matter of fact, we have on our website still an opportunity for people to donate to Samaritan's Purse because we think so highly of that organization. I've had Franklin Graham actually sit in that very chair and tell us about some of the things that are possible. But this is much more than just giving money. This is getting involved. And it seems to me that there are some real opportunities, first of all, with Hurricane Harvey. 2,000 different projects. What do those entail? Because some people might say, well, I'm not real good with building buildings. You know, I'm not a Habitat for Humanity type person. But there are other opportunities, too, aren't there?
Yeah, there's 12,000 of them on there where some are buckets for Harvey that the Baptist men are organizing. You can just go to the store and buy these things and drop off at a location. Some are, we just mobilized 20,000 Texas A&M students who are going to go down there for weeks at a time and just, clean out people's houses. I mean, there are other projects where it's donating food. There are other ones where you go to a certain location and they give you the tasks and you just, you go out and serve. And so that's down on the Gulf Coast. There are those that are just hands-on right there. And then ones in other cities. There are locations where you can go and drop off food distribution and do different buckets and things like that. But there's also a real need for displaced people who are
That's
leaving.
What I was wondering about.
Yeah. And so the Dallas Convention Center is a safe haven now where people are all going to, and they have all kinds of needs that are posted on the site. Vomo.org/Harvey, and they can go get involved with that.
I was just talking to somebody that works down there, and you're talking about everything, Rob, because they show up, and we're talking about clothes and food. We're talking about toothbrushes. We're talking about dental care. We're talking about medical care. We're talking about education. We're talking about diapers. Well, I mean, you're completely disconnected from your life, and they show up sometimes with nothing more than the clothes on their back. And then usually a CNN reporter sticks a microphone in their face, and we saw that reaction just the other day when the woman said, I was trying to drive my kids off, and you're already asking me about this. So, again, there are some incredible needs, and if you're in the Dallas area, certainly that's a proper opportunity. Louisiana. Now we got Irma. I think we're going to have some more of those as well. So right now we're talking about vomo.org/Harvey. I got a feeling there'll be vomo.org/Irma pretty soon.
And we're working on it right now.
Yeah, that is incredible. So those are opportunities with the crisis. Talk about for just a minute some of the opportunities in our local community, because, again, as you said, this is our Jerusalem, and I will guarantee you there are a lot of churches that don't even know down the block there's an opportunity for somebody to serve.
Well, that was me. I met with the mayor of Garland back when I was a pastor here, and I said, hey, I've got 2,000 people here in my congregation. How do we go make a difference locally? And he said, number one, I've never been asked this by a pastor before.
Yeah.
And secondly, do you realize there's Title I schools literally within a mile of your church? And I didn't know. I was blind. I was too busy doing all the things inside the walls of the church that were great, but I just was ignorant of the needs. And so through that, we started just mobilizing people to go do Big Brother programs and get the CPAs in the church to come do taxes and how to do finance and balance checkbooks and all kinds of education. And so there are literally projects like that all over the city.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because, again, a lot of people think that it's going to be manual labor, or it's going to be something where I have to be able to use a hammer, or I've got to know how to use a backhoe or something like that, and they just say, well, this is not me. But anybody with any kind of skill sometimes can match up their gifts with opportunities in their community.
Exactly, and that's what we want to do, is match people's heart passions and their skill set. And really be able to leverage those, because each of us are unique and we have all these different experiences that God has given. So I truly believe when we learn how to leverage that for the kingdom, that gives God the most glory, and hopefully is a witness to a world that's just watching and it doesn't know Christ. And so when you go onto the app or onto the platform on the web, you can actually click and specify different projects. Some of them say we need accountants, we need just manual laborers, we need house cleaners. So we have all those specified out, and you just click which one you want to do, claims the spot, it sends you an email, sends an email to the organizer. It also gives you a push notification on your phone. When you get there, you get a push notification, you're notified to check in, which helps gives accurate data and analytics. Last year we launched this at Together 2016 in Washington, D.C., and there were 500,000 millennials there.
Yeah.
And we worked with 300 churches in the mayor's office, and what was really cool was we saw 12,000 people mobilized to go serve in one day.
That's amazing.
Which was, the mayor came back and they gave us an award called the Excellence in Service Award, because they said they've never seen the faith community mobilized into the secular world because there's a lot of distrust a lot of times. And so to me, that was a huge testimony. That's like the book of Acts. That's the people of God getting the favor of the city, which I want more of that,
Yeah. So again, you've had some experiences even in your own church in Garland, and then when you've been to London and other places, right? And so it seems to me that this is something that really can change the dynamic of the church, can it? Because instead of just sitting and soaking, you're going out there and being a real significant difference maker in the community.
Oh, exactly. I think discipleship, rightly formed inside of us, it must propel us out. We're not here just to be, become smarter sinners like Howard Hendricks would always say down at DTS. But we've got to do something with the knowledge and the faith and the love and the hope that we have. And that outpouring is when we go do something with it. So a lot of times in our circles, we talk all about gospel of proclamation, but it has to be married with a gospel of demonstration for a full integrated gospel to really be living out our faith fully, and so I've seen this in London and across Western Europe and across the U.S. And when we can get that right and mobilize the church, we are an unstoppable force and an army for the kingdom of God to turn this world upside down.
If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Last half hour, I'd love to hear what your community is doing, what your church doing right now to meet some of those needs. Are you already effectively finding a way to take the members of your church and integrate them into the society and provide opportunities for service? Or is this something you think you might want to begin as an experiment in your church? So we'll come back and talk a little bit more about how you can use this. But if you'd like to join us, open line in this last half hour, 1-800-351-1212. We talk about Hurricane Harvey, now the possibility of devastation from Hurricane Irma. I'd love to know what you plan to do as an individual, what your church plans to do as a corporate body of believers, and how you're trying to reach your own Jerusalem and also make a difference in a community that desperately needs. If you haven't seen the needs, we can give you the long list, but the best way to go and find those needs is to go to vomo.org, and you can find that particular app. We also have a link to awakenmovement.com. And again, my assignment to you is to not only look at the information there by Rob Peabody, but also we have this video that you can watch. It's 2 minutes, 40 seconds long. I encourage you to watch it. And then click the share button. There's a little arrow there, and that gives you an opportunity to put it on Facebook, on Twitter. You can send it by email, and I would encourage you to do that and to educate other people about the fact that so often we are frustrated with the fact that we have all sorts of needs on one side. We have individuals on the other side that would like to be involved, but they don't know how to connect up. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to make that happen in your life and in your church. And this is, of course, a great project for those of you that are Eagle Scouts or Girl Scouts or individuals that want to make a difference in your community and have that responsibility or would like to do an internship. So we want to talk about how to do that. But most importantly, I want to open up the phones and hear what you are doing in your community. So if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. We'll take a break, continue our conversation with Rob Peabody right after this.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change, but how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, we'll keep Rob Peabody in a little bit longer and wanted to, again, help you understand that there is a way in which you can connect your particular gifts to needs in your community. There's a way in which your church can connect to those needs as well. So I want you to take the time to find out a little bit more about awakenmovement.com. And then, of course, we have a link, vomo.org, which is where the app is. But before we go any further, Rob, we're talking about what individuals and churches can do, but this is much broader. This involves corporations and governments and other things. So for other people that might say, oh, good, that's a nice church app. No, this is a lot broader than this, isn't it?
Oh, completely. So VOMO is really a volunteer movement.
Yes.
We say that we're creating a movement for good, and we love the double entendre there, where it's for good, but also for good, you know.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, we now are, Awaken My City. At the beginning was just for churches.
Yes.
And it was built for churches to mobilize their people. But then we found that the tech we'd built really carries over into every sector of society. And so now we're working with VOMO businesses and VOMO education. Yesterday when I was up in D.C., it was about VOMO Gov. Like, how do we mobilize cities and counties and even states, or even at the federal level, to respond to natural disasters like this and promote volunteerism as a response and a solution? And so by using VOMO, they can go and serve and get the people out to make a difference locally. Corporations, we're finding that they're really getting involved with this because corporate responsibility and corporate give back is so big that our culture basically, mandates that now in the corporate world. And we're finding that millennials are, becoming the largest workforce in the nation, or in the world, actually. And 59% of millennials say they would take a pay cut to work at a company that gives back for the common good, regardless of their faith or their background.
Mm-hmm.
Another stat we just found in a Deloitte study last month said that morale in the workplace is increased 89% more by serving with your colleagues than by going to a happy hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I believe that.
Like, this is where we're at. And so if we can come in and be an HR tool to help see more people mobilized and capture the analytics, the data, integrate that with social media and their marketing, and also really give them good PR and a reason to talk about their company, they become clients of VOMO, and we help facilitate that for them.
So if somebody's listening and maybe they're the head of a small business and say, I've never really thought about having some kind of corporate opportunity to do a service project, this is a way in which to actually facilitate that, isn't there?
Exactly. And so we've got two tiers where if you're already doing this, we're a software as a service kind of turnkey solution where we just onboard your company and turn your people loose. But a lot of companies, especially some smaller ones, they're like, hey, I know we want to do this and my employees would love this, but I don't know where to start. And it's a good idea, but I don't have time to mess with it.
Right.
So you can actually outsource all of that to us. So we come into the company, we meet with the departments, we help get projects in alignment with the values of the company, with how they want to serve outside the walls of the company. And then we load all the projects up on VOMO and turn their employees loose.
That's really amazing. So again, let's come back to the churches, because again, some people might not have heard our discussion earlier, but they can go to vomo.org and they can actually get this app, or they can go to their app store and get it on whatever particular device they might have. So when they load it up, what do they do next? Does it already figure out who you are, what you need, and all that? Or are there some check boxes you need? How do you go about this?
Sure. You download it. You either create a login with your Facebook account or you sign up right there. It takes literally 30 seconds, super easy. It geolocates you.
Yes.
Knows where you are. You can also type in a different zip code, a different city if you're going to be traveling or you live somewhere else. But yeah, then it just starts populating with projects that are there.
That's what I saw it happen on mine. Yeah.
And it's great because literally then you're just clicking it, picking a time and a role, signing up. It's all confirmed through the app, and it shoots an email out to you, and it just connects all the dots. But if there aren't projects in your community, if it hasn't made it out to your city yet, it then prompts you to go to your business or to your church or to an organization or a nonprofit or whoever, and easily gives them free access to start making projects. And so really it's kind of both sides of the equation. It's the pipeline you were talking about at the beginning of bridging that gap between actual, real, tangible needs and people who can meet those needs. And so we kind of hit it from both ends, almost like a meetup.com, like we're bringing them all together and aggregating all of that to really make it very, very simple for people to make a difference and do something for good.
So again, if you're running a homeless shelter, or maybe you're a pregnancy resource center, or maybe you have some opportunities to build shelters or to minister to people or mentor people, you can be on that side populating that. And then, of course, we're talking about the end users. They can actually go through that list and find those. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because in some of the communities where we broadcast, this may not have actually landed quite yet. But it's a great answer, because if somebody right now were to ask for opportunities in Dallas, I could give you that. But when we have people that are in Stockton, California, Peoria, Illinois, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Augusta, Georgia, just to mention a few off the top of my head, I don't have any idea. And maybe in those communities, they don't have any idea. They may just now be able to begin to populate that with opportunities, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Take it to your small group, to your church leader, take it to a nonprofit or anybody, and we will just direct them to the site. We'll get them on there for free. We'll give them the tools. We'll allow them to start populating needs. And then, you've just turned on a switch to leverage all kinds of people's experience and manpower to really be out there, putting action in their faith.
And like you said, you can filter it. So if you have expertise in accounting, or maybe you could be a math tutor, or maybe you're good at music, or maybe you do have construction capabilities, whatever, you can begin to make sure that it focuses on those things where you are really in your sweet spot in terms of your abilities, right?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. We cater it and try to make it exactly for the real needs of the project. Because a lot of times I think in organizations, maybe coming from a church background, we want to help and we mobilize people to help, but we kind of want to do it in the ways that we want to help a lot of times. Yeah. And this actually empowers the people who are going to receive the needs to say, no, this is what we need. We need an architect. We need a accountant or whatever it is. And then we can really make a tangible difference because we're marrying up real practical needs with people who can meet those. And so the other big thing is what we call campaigns. And so this is what we've done.
That's what I was going to get to next. Yeah. How can a church or a pastor kind of do the campaign? Go ahead.
Yeah. And so vomo.org/Harvey is the example of a campaign where you can customize it and make a banner just like Facebook. And now multiple nonprofits in a community or multiple churches in a community can post projects and attach them to this campaign. So now it's pulling them together here from all different types of organizations around a community around a bigger cause. And so a lot of churches use campaigns when they do like Give Back Sunday or the church is closed Sunday, we're going to go serve out locally. And so they make a campaign for that, give access for free to all of the nonprofits that they support and work with. They all post their projects on there. And now we've really become a megaphone for what's happening all across a community. And I love that because it really pulls together the unity of the church. So on a micro level, it helps what they're trying to do locally. But on a macro level, we've seen this in D.C. pull together 300 churches from all different denominations and backgrounds and races. And what a testimony.
What a testimony, yes.
When our nation is so divided and we have so many issues right now about disunity, this is pulling people together around gospel of demonstration.
Yes, I've said, a lot of people say, well, America is Charlottesville. No, America is Houston. When we see of all these incredible stories, so many positive stories that have come out there, individuals that are working together, and they don't know if the person being rescued or the person doing the rescuing is a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, whether they voted for Trump or they didn't vote for Trump. I mean, we are just talking about meeting each other's needs. And so this is certainly a very strategic time with Hurricane Harvey and the possibility of Hurricane Irma, but it's also just a very significant need that you've met. So one last time, just before I let you go, they can go to vomo.org and they can find the app, or if they want to do something with Harvey, it's vomo.org/Harvey, right?
That's exactly right.
And again, you might speak to the pastors. A pastor can really bring this to their congregation this Sunday, couldn't they? So what would they do?
Completely. Pastor would go to that site. It'll link them over to our faith-based church site, which is awakenmycity.com. They can sign up for free. Our team will then jump on email and contact them. We've got training videos. We got everything you need to just launch your church in a day. And then you start bringing in all the stuff your church is already doing, because a lot of times the church is doing a lot of stuff, but we don't necessarily communicate across the church. So not everybody knows what's happening, and we really don't have a way to quantify a lot of times how we are doing good out in the community. And so through our analytics and our data and our report, we have a real-time dashboard that's taking volunteer hours, breaking down the demographics. It's converting that to a dollar amount because every state gives a different dollar amount for 1 hour of human service. So when you can stand up on a Sunday and say, wow, our church just gave $100,000 of human capital to our community, that's going to speak to people outside the walls of the church because now we're taking it there. And so very easy to set up in that sense. And what I tell pastors all the time is all our people believe in the Great Commandment and Great Commission, and we're convinced of the why, but we're stuck because we don't know how to get to the how. And this is the how of how we integrate that and live it out.
Rob Peabody, thank you for being with us today. Just outstanding. And again, go to the website. We'll say more about that right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. To those who seek to better the world through the understanding of God's physical laws and innovation of practical solutions. That was the inscription Dr. Mike McCracken wanted on the plaque of the new conference room, paid for by his donations to Purdue University and placed in honor of the people who inspired him the most, his parents. But the university rejected the language. According to their legal analysis, the inclusion of the phrase God's physical laws could be seen as an endorsement of religion, violating the Constitution. There are dozens of plaques throughout the campus. Most identify alumni or donors. In the Student Center, a large display of plaques features the bronze images of past presidents and a quote of theirs. There are quotes from past graduates like Neil Armstrong and even plaques with quotes from Socrates and Aristotle. So why would the university proudly display plaques featuring quotes from astronauts, ancient philosophers, and even past presidents, but refuse an alumnus wishing to honor his parents with a passing reference to God's laws? Good question. By permitting plaques to display secular quotations but refusing religious references, the university was committing what we call viewpoint discrimination. But after a letter pointing that out and some discussions over the phone, Purdue agreed to redo the plaque to make it clear that the reference to God's physical laws was coming from Dr. McCracken and not the university. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention again that we are facing what could be record property damage just with Hurricane Harvey, even before we get into Hurricane Irma. You go back a couple of years and we have Hurricane Sandy that when you adjust it for inflation maybe cost $20 billion. When you talk about, of course, the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, that's about $25 trillion. But when you get into Hurricane Katrina, we're talking about $50 trillion. And so when you add Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy together, that's $70 billion. And this will probably be even more so for Hurricane Harvey, and who knows what will happen with Hurricane Irma. So I do encourage you to figure out what you might want to do to help. We have encouraged you to support various ministries, and one of those that we have posted on our website, pointofview.net, is, of course, Samaritan's Purse, and it's still available to you on the website, and I was heartened to see some of the gifts that we have actually passed on to Samaritan's Purse. But there's also an opportunity for you to serve, so one last time, let me just mention that Rob Peabody was with us, and we talked about the Awaken My City promo and testimony. That is about 2.5 minutes long. I would encourage you to watch the video, then click on that share button and share it with someone. And, of course, he talked about this app that you can get to VOMO, which stands for Volunteer Mobilization. This works not only for churches, but for governments and for businesses and for cities. And so all sorts of opportunities for you to place needs on there, and also for you to find ways in which you can serve as well. So I hope that you will do that. And before we leave this conversation for just a minute about the disasters, I thought I'd also point out something I mentioned the other day but wanted to come back to, and that is that we've had a couple of churches in the state of Texas and one synagogue that were devastated by Hurricane Harvey and the floodwaters, and they've sued the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA. And they did so because they felt that they should have access to disaster relief funds. The argument that they're using is pretty simple. Other nonprofit organizations are eligible for these federal funds, but they're denied to religious groups, and they believe that they should have equal access to these disaster relief grants. You think about that in light of the recent Supreme Court decision, that makes a lot of sense. The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in the Trinity Lutheran case last spring that indeed the Trinity Lutheran Church in Missouri that had applied for a state grant program to resurface its playground with recycled rubber, even though they ranked high, were actually turned down because they were religious. And the Supreme Court, I think, rightly ruled that once a state creates a neutral program for public benefit, it cannot exclude a church from the program. So this lawsuit of these religious groups, 2 churches, 1 synagogue, is a little different, but it has the same kind of philosophical foundation. Because if you think about this, hurricanes and tornadoes destroy both secular and religious nonprofit organizations, but only the secular ones can actually apply for FEMA grants. As one lawyer put it, Hurricane Harvey didn't cherry-pick its victims. FEMA shouldn't cherry-pick who it helps. Well, this is even more significant when you realize that oftentimes the government uses churches and other houses of worship, including the synagogue that as part of this lawsuit, to provide for shelter, to provide for the distribution of meals, and even to provide medical care. So the government is quite willing to step into a church, a synagogue, or another house of worship and use it as an emergency facility to meet the needs of the community. However, those same churches that provide that as a service to the government and to the community aren't eligible to receive these FEMA grants because they're religious. And so it seems to me that if they are providing comfort and relief to various refugees and victims, I think the federal government should provide comfort and relief for those as well in terms of some of those financial grants. So we'll see how that goes, but it's one of those issues that's in the news right now, and I thought might be good to talk about here on Point of View. Just before we go, though, let me mention that each day we post my commentary. My commentary today is actually about Islam, but it's entitled The Vast Majority Myth. And if you haven't had a chance to go to the website pointofview.net, let me encourage you to do so, because this particular one is one that you can download. Of course, you can also sign up to receive my Viewpoints commentary on a regular basis. And the point is that we oftentimes hear that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful. And while that's certainly true, if you go back to a very good article written a number of years ago by William Kilpatrick, who's been on the program with us, he countered that with 3 propositions. The first was that the vast majority of people are peaceful until they're not. And there's easy to find all sorts of examples of people who were peaceful for a long time and then quickly turned violent. I've used this as an example in the past. The vast majority of Hutus in Rwanda were certainly behaving peacefully until 1994, and then they were not. And by the end of that year, the Hutus had killed 800,000 Tutsis using clubs and machetes. You could say that the vast majority of Europeans in the early part of the 20th century were peaceful until 1914, when all the nations of the world went to war with each other. His second proposition is the reality that the vast majority of people will go with the flow. We saw that the majority of the Hutus went with the flow, and this is especially true of Islam. I mean, most Muslims, especially in this country, would just like to be left alone. They want to go about their business. They want to earn an income. They want to support their family. They really don't care. But William Kilpatrick, said that one of the built-in features of Islam is that you won't be left alone, because the nature of the religion is oftentimes it forces you to be good. And the way to be good is to actually fulfill and to conform to Sharia law. This is true not only in a country that has Sharia law, but especially true of a country that has a caliphate. And his third and final proposition is that the majority of people in any society are oftentimes women and children. And women and children probably aren't violent. Although some Hutu women probably took part in the slaughter of Tutsis, it's probably true that the vast majority did not. It's little comfort to those who were slaughtered. When we look at the jihadists, most jihadists and suicide bombers are men. They're not women or children. And while it is true the vast majority of jihadists are not indeed men or women, are women and children, it really makes no difference in terms of the dangerous reality that brings. So just a couple of thoughts, and it is part of my commentary today, and I would encourage you to sign up to receive that, and it is available on our website, pointofview.net. One last time, I wanted you to know about Rob Peabody's piece that is so available. This is an app that you can put on your phone, you can put on your computer. It is powered by VOMO, which stands for Volunteer Mobilization. It is something that you can do as an individual. It's something that your church can do. It's something that your business could do as well. So if you'd like to know a little bit more, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, follow the link. There's a 2.5-minute video that I encourage you to watch and to pass on to others. And if you find that some of the things we talked about today would be something you'd like to pass on to your pastor or to somebody in a position of leadership in your church, you could download the podcast and send it to them, or you can go to our YouTube channel and send them the interview that we did with Rob Peabody. So all of that is available at our website, pointofview.net. And I encourage you tomorrow to join us on our Friday weekend edition. Lots to talk about, many issues we didn't even get a chance to cover today, so we'll do those tomorrow on our weekend edition. I want to thank Andrew and Stephen for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow on our Friday weekend edition.
There are those who listen to Point of View while they're driving, and some can listen at home or at work. But here's the question. Where do you go where you cannot listen to Point of View? Well, if you have the app, the free Point of View radio app, the answer is just about nowhere. This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary. Click the Take Action link. Learn about important issues and make a difference in this world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, easily contact us with your comments or questions. Don't leave home or the office or anywhere else without Point of View. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the free Point of View radio app. Oh, and one more thing, if you like it, click that little button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.